first user group already. Today is the November session, as you can see. As usually, we're gonna record the sessions. The session will be available afterwards on YouTube, so you can check it out. Hope that's fine for everyone. If not, just let me know so I can pause it, especially for Rui. If that's okay for you, we will put it on YouTube afterwards. Today we have the great Rui Romano, who will talk about the professional developer experience in Power BI. Afterwards, we will do the What's New session, and then Denis is going to talk a little bit about the Fabric journey. Today is the part 5, and we're going to discover Data Activator. And with that, I would already hand over to Rui. Thank you very much for being here. Really exciting to see your demo.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Great to be here. And so let me just share my screen so we can get started. Okay. You can see my screen?
Not yet. I still see mine.
For a minute.
Let me stop sharing.
No, it's my bad.
There we are. Now I can see it.
You can see it? Okay. So my name is Rui. I'm a product manager on the Power BI team. So the best way to reach to me is through LinkedIn or Twitter. I also have my GitHub repos where I post many stuff. Actually, some of the things that I'm going to show today, actually, they are not in that repo. I just published them on the official Microsoft Analysis Services repo. So my mistake. So the agenda of today, we are going to talk about developer mode. We are going to talk about Fabric Kit. We're going to talk about CI/CD and how you can have continuous integration and continuous deployment using Power BI today with developer mode and Fabric Kit integration. And if we have the time, we can also talk a little bit about what's next. I hope I can talk to you about Tyndall, even show you a demo, and also a few things about the Fabric APIs that will be released next month. Actually, this month, end of this month, hopefully. So one thing that I like to talk about is about what my team is doing and what's our focus, or my focus is. So as you know, Power BI was always a tool that always focused on the, let's say, non-developers and non-professionals. So the main focus was on the reports creators, on the data set creators, but that doesn't mean that they need to be a professional developer. We don't want to change that. So that will never going to that is never going to change. Those are our main persona. But what we are doing is also giving some love and bringing some of the professional developer experiences, like source control, like model explorer, so having metadata exploration directly in Power BI desktop, queries, so the ability for you to write that queries inside desktop. So we are bringing those features directly into our product. So because up until now, if you wanted to have source control, for example, you needed to use, or if you wanted to have a good source control experience, that was very difficult to have without using some external tools like Tabular Editor, and the same thing for CI/CD, and the same thing for metadata exploration. And we just shipped the Metadata Explorer. We are going to ship next month the DAX query view, the ability for you to write DAX queries. I know that Zoe did an amazing demo in June or May at Build. And today we are going to, and the features that I own as a PM is mostly the source control features, the developer mode, the Fabric integration. This is what we are going to talk about today. But I just wanted to give you some of the bigger picture of what is our goal as a team and what we are focusing. So developer mode and Fabric Kit integration. I will assume that most of you already know what it is, but can I do a quick show of hands if you don't know what is developer mode, or if you have never tried it before? Because this will depend on the type of session. Either we can move a little bit faster and skip some of the demos or not. Okay, I can see that a few people show their hands. So I will do a quick intro, but I won't be focusing on doing like a big deep dive intro into developer mode, but I will start here. So developer mode is, let's say, it's not yet really a mode in Power BI Desktop, but it is not. It is a. We still call it a developer mode because the main purpose of it of this mode, whenever you save as a Power BI project that will be in the developer mode, is to let you have a source control experience, a friendly source control experience, is to have co-development, so multiple developers all working on the same project, is to improve efficiency because we want to give you visibility into the metadata of your Power BI projects and of your Power BI developments, and whenever you get visibility, you can to the metadata, you can start to be more efficient. Like if you know that if a certain task if you need to do a certain task 100 times, and you figure out what you can do it once and look at the metadata and then just replicate that directly in the metadata instead of doing that in the product, that could be more efficient. And of course, we want to, without having to use any external tool, we wanted to have more reliability into your projects, having the continuous integration and continuous deployment to be really easy for you to implement those, let's say, quality check gates before reaching to the final environment, like production test, quality, whatever it is. So the first feature, and this is just the first because we are going to bring more and more under this umbrella of developer mode, and maybe in the future there will be actually a developer mode inside of desktop, something that you can, like a persona experience that you can switch. But this is, we have it on the backlog, we still need to put a lot of more thought into it, but for now there is no mode. So to be in developer mode, what you need to do is to use this new feature called Save as a Power BI Project. And this new feature, basically, you open a PBIX file, and now you have the option when you go to the file, Save As, you have the option. Sorry, let me just turn on Zoom it. I forgot. So you now have the option to save as a Power BI project. And when you save as a Power BI project, you get a folder like this one, where you have one folder for the data set and one folder for the reports. And the thing about this folder is that it's all text metadata files. So, because it's all text metadata files, you can easily integrate it with any source control tool like GitHub or whatever the source control tool that you use. Another thing that is important about this is it's bidirectional. So you can convert to a PBIP and you can convert it back to a PBIX. Why this is important? It's because you might be on a team that you just watched this presentation and you think this is going to be useful, but your entire team is not ready to do that. It's not ready to make that shift. So you can still use it for you. And in the end, whenever you share with the other developers or the other users, you just save it back and convert it as a PBIX, and you are still working in the PBIP and taking all the advantages of doing that. And you can also, of course, publish a PBIP directly from desktop. So you don't need to go through the Power BI Git integration. So I always like to do what I call a quick anatomy to the PBIP, and tell you a little bit about what is important, what is less important. So everything in its own, it is important. So all the files are required, but some files are more important than the others. So the first one is the PBIP, and I always like to say that this feels like to be the most important file, but it's not. It's probably the least important file. It's just a shortcut. This is the only thing that this file is doing, is targeting the report. So that's the only thing that is doing. And in this case, this is a PBIP. You can see that I have the sales report and the sales dataset folder. And inside the report, that is the sales PBIP, is just referencing the folder of the sales of the report. And it could be referencing another report. I can have on the same folder, I can have multiple reports and multiple data sets at the same time. That's fine. But the only thing that the PBIP file is doing is just a shortcut. Then the most important files. So inside of the data set, you have this model BIM file. And the model BIM file is a JSON file. It's using the tabular model scripting language format. It's a well-known and publicly documented. It exists for many years, even before Power BI. And the entire data set definition is in this file. We are going to change this. I will leave that to the end, but we are going to change this file to Tyndall. It's going to be much more source control friendly and also co-development friendly. Then we have the cache ABF. And the cache ABF, it's a binary file. It's the only file inside of the PBIP that it's not a text metadata file. So it's a binary file. But this file, it's not for source control. This file is actually ignored. There is another file when you save as a PBIP called git ignore, that if you use git, it will make the git to ignore this file, to not store this file inside of the Git database that will track all the files. So, but why this file exists? It's still a very important file because this file holds all the data. So whenever you close Power BI Desktop and you open Power BI Desktop, what we do is we load this file, we load the data back into memory, and we make sure that the model that you have in the model BIM is synchronized to the model that you have in the cache ABF, because the cache ABF is basically just an analysis services backup. Okay, but it's very important that you will hold the data, but it's not important at all to the definition of your data set. So that's why this is not going to source controls. Well, what this means is you can delete this file and you can open the PBIP and it will work. There won't be any problem in doing that. The only thing is when you do that, and when you open the PBIP, this is the scenario that you will encounter. It's an empty report with empty data because there won't be any data. You need to refresh your Power BI Desktop again. Then, and this is the data set. There are a bunch of other files, but this is all on the documentation. We can learn more about them. But they are not the most important things. Now, the report.json, also a very important file. And this file is the file that represents the entire report. So all the pages, all the bookmarks, all the visuals, everything is inside this file. It's a JSON file, but in contrast to the model BIM file, to the TIMSEL file, this format, it's not documented at all. So you cannot find any documentation. And this file and this format was never built and meant to be public. So the only reason why we shipped the PBIP with it is just because of time. So we didn't have the time to build a new format in time of the shipping of the PBIP, because for the PBIP, it doesn't care about the format. So it just cares about the folder structure and the source control. And this file, yes, it's not source control friendly. And I'm happy to let you know that we are actively working on a new format that won't have this type of problems. But still, it's a very important file. The only problem that you will find as you start to use PBIP is that it's not going to be a very friendly file for your source control and to do merges. It's still much better than the binary, than the PBIX. If you save as a PBIX and you wanted to put the PBIX in source control, but it's still not what we want, and we are not going to GA developer mode until we have a new format that is much more source control and co-development ready. Then inside the report, there is another very important file. It's the definition PVIR, and it's also a shortcut in a way, because you can also open Power BI Desktop by double-clicking on this file. And this file, the most important thing that it will do, it will hold the reference to the dataset. So the dataset, the report, always must connect to a dataset. So that dataset might be a local dataset, and in that case is a bypass connection. And you will see that this is targeting the folder, the relative path to the folder of the dataset. So in this case, the sales dataset is inside my PVIP folder. And then you also have the by connection. And the by connection is a non-relative path. So it's when you want to connect to a dataset in the service. So in here, it will have a connection string that will target your Power BI premium or non-premium workspace. Okay, so this means that if you open Power BI Desktop, you connect to an existing data set, you save as a PVIP, you will see that your PVIR will have a by connection and not a bypass. Okay. Okay, before the demo, let's talk a little bit about Git. So this session is not an introduction into Git, but I want to mention that whenever you use the PVIP, you are not obliged to use the Git. You can still save as a PVIP and get some advantages on saving as a PVIP. You don't use Git at all, but the main purpose is to have source control. So you will use. Is there any question? I'm hearing some noise. I don't think so.
I will mute her, but I see a hand raised from Jürg. I'm not sure if he has a question or is it still raised from the beginning.
You want to ask a question, Jürg? I don't think so. Maybe it was raised from the beginning.
It's Stephen here. I have a question. I just tried to do it myself to save it, but I only get Power BI file and Power BI template files. Do you need to have a special version of Power BI to save it as a project file? Or?
No. Actually, that's a very good question. I completely forgot mentioning that, although I think I had that on the demo. You need to enable a preview switch. So that is a preview switch that you need to enable to see the save as a PVIP. So I'm just opening desktop. So whenever you go to the file options, there is a preview feature that it's called Power BI project PVIP save option. Okay, and this is the preview feature that you need to enable to see that save as PVIP.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so as I was saying, you don't need to use Git, but if you let's say 90% of the scenarios, anyone that is going to use PVIP is going to use Git. And I just want to mention that Power BI Desktop, it's not aware of Git at all. So if you use Git or not, Power BI Desktop is not going to know that. So this means that to initialize your Git repo, to do the basic commands like a commit, a pull, and push, create branches, you need to use an external application. So you need to, and our recommendation is use VS Code because it's a free user level application. So you don't need to have admin permissions to install it. But you need to have this dependency. So this also means that you need to learn about these tools. This also means that you need to learn about Git. You need to learn the basics around Git. What is a commit? What is a pull? What is a push? You need, and those are the baselines. Then if you want to take it to the next level, you should learn about branching. You should learn about branching strategies, how to do a merge, how to solve those merge conflicts. This might seem like a complex thing. I know that from experience that it's not an easy thing to get started. It's different, but it's very, very well worth the investment, because what you will get is you no longer need to worry about backing up your Power BI development. So every change that you do in Power BI Desktop, and when you save and you go to VS Code, you can commit those changes and you can track those changes. So everything is going to be tracked by a time, by the author, if you have more than one user. But even if you are using just for you get a ton of benefits just by tracking all your developments, because as you do the tracking, you can also create branches, and you can from those versions. So this will let you easily, for example, go to the version of 2 weeks ago because there was a bug that you introduced into your development. So you can just do that. Without having Git, you cannot do that. So the only way to do that is to do something that I'm sure that most of you have done, like having like V1, V2, V3 of your PBIX files, which is fine if you are fine with it. But if you want to take this to the next level, if you want to collaborate within a team, if you want to have a more professional experience and get all these advantages for free, you don't need to do that anymore. So actually, a very good alternative to have those V1, V2, V3 is to have feature branches. Is to use branches, so you can have exactly the same thing of the V1, V2, V3, but instead of having different folders and have to manage those folders, you still only have one folder, and then you create the branches using and then you can switch between the branches really, really easy. So let me do a demo of this whole thing. So yeah, on the demo, I do have the preview switch. So you need to enable that preview switch to be to see the save as PBIP. So I'm on a PBIX file. I just opened a PBIX file. I can now save it as a PBIP, and now I get those two folders. So I saved my PBIX file, and now instead of having a single file, I do have a folder with two subfolders in it, and the folders, they basically hold all the metadata around an artifact, because, and this is also an important concept, and why you get two folders. And you may ask, okay, I only have one PBIX file, why I get two folders? It's because it's aligned with the same mental model that you have in the service. Because if you publish a PBIX file, you always get two things. You always get a report and a data set, because inside of the PBIX, you have those two things. It's all packaged inside the same file, the same binary file, but actually inside of it, you have the data set and the report as two separate entities. So on the PBIP, we don't make that distinction. We clearly make that distinction. So you have the dataset folder and the report folder, and the dataset folder holds all the metadata around the dataset, and the report folder all the metadata around the report. Oh, sorry. So you save as a PBIP, and now you get those two folders. You move a little bit now. What you need to do is you need to open those folders in one of those folders in VS Code, and then in VS Code you can initialize your Git repo. So that's what I'm doing right now. So I go to VS Code, and I have this initialize Git repo in the source control tab, and you can click there, and this will initialize your Git repo. So, and by the way, you can think as Git as a database that will track every change that you do on your files. Okay, so now that I initialize my Git repo and I go back to Power BI Desktop and I do a change. So for example, I'm going to remove the bold in here. I'm also going to make a background change in this card, and I save. I can not only track, okay, what was the file that changed it inside of my PBIP. So as I told you, if you do a report change, it will be on the report.json. But I can also review those changes. I can see that, okay, there was a change on the visual with this internal name, actually 2 changes on 2 visuals. So I can easily track those changes. I know that this format, it's not the best format to identify those changes. One more time, we're going to change it. So I can commit those changes. Another best practice is that whenever you do a change on your development, you should like a unit of work, and a unit of work could be creating a new report page, or it could be creating a new measure, or making a change in a query. You should commit that. So now I'm going to do a Power Query change. And I'm also going to do a measure change. Yeah, okay. This one is a little bit better. Now, because this is standard JSON, I now see there was a change in the model.pim, and I can see what is the difference between one version and the other. So you also get this for free whenever you have a Git repo, which just this is good, right? Because this is useful for you whenever you do those changes, just to make a final revision before sharing this code with other users. Then I do the commit. And another thing that is important about the PVIP is that, and we've made a lot of effort to make this possible, is we are okay for you to do changes with external tools. You just need to follow the rules. So of course that if you make a change, like you open one of those JSON files and you do a bad edit, you will get an error. And this is what we call desktop hardening. It's basically desktop is going to validate the files before opening, and if there is something wrong, we will tell you, okay, what's the file that has something wrong and what you need to fix. But we do support you to go to those files. So in here, I'm going directly to the model.pim, and I'm going to open Tablet Editor. I don't even need to have Power BI Desktop opened, and I'm going to do some change. So I'm going to duplicate the table. I'm also going to create a new measure. So you can do, if you use an external tool that follows the best practices, and it's going to follow the hardening rules, that will be fine. It's the same thing if you also make the changes directly to the files. You can also do that. In the end, what will happen is when you open desktop, we will just load those changes. So I'm also going to do a change in the report. So something that I always like to highlight is in a report, if you have images or if you have a theme file, there will be those files will be under the registered resources. So what this means is if you want to swap those files, if you want to change the theme file, or if you want to change the logos, you just need to change the image, and then you reload the PVIP. And why this is important for you to know, it's because if you want to do it for one report, that's fine. Just do it in the application. But imagine that if you want to do it for 100 reports, so there is your company just changed the logo, you need to change all your reports to the new logo. Doing that in the application, like downloading the PBIX files, opening desktop, and making the change in the application, this will take you probably more than 1 day. Now, another alternative is if you are using the PVIP format, doing a change like this is as simple as doing this, is as simple as going to the file that has the image, or the file that has a theme, and replacing the content. Yeah, I just did. I think I skipped that, but I also did the same thing, just replacing the image with a new image. And now if I open or reopen my PVIP, my report will have that new logo, and it will also have that new theme. So in this case, I'm using the dark mode theme. Let me skip this one. Now, another thing that I always like to call out is those track changes. So you can easily track all the changes that you have been doing. And And you can do that using VS Code or whatever the Git application that you want. So I can see that, oh, sorry. I can see that these are all the changes that I did. I know the time, the hour, the day that I did that change. And it's really, really easy to do something like, okay, I did those, let's say, I did those external tool changes, and then I regret it, or there was some bug that I introduced, and I want to go to this version. I want to go to the version immediately before I did those external changes. See how easy this is. And for me personally, this is the reason. This is enough. This is the main. This is the reason that should justify you to use a PBIP if you are a pro developer rather than a PBIX. Now, because now I can just right-click this commit and say create a new branch from this commit, and I give a new name to this branch, so called before tablet editor. I create a branch, see how fast this is. So this is seconds, and now my folder is going to switch to that new branch. So if I go again to the PBIP and I restart desktop, so another important concept: desktop is not aware from changes outside of desktop. So if you make a change outside of desktop, you need to restart desktop. We will probably change this in the future. We will make desktop aware of those changes and at least notify you, but that's currently, this is how it works. So now if I open the PBIP, remember my previous PBIP was in dark mode and it has a few measure changes. Now I'm going, I just went back to my previous version. So this is just this, in my opinion, it's worth the switch. Now, another thing is I just showed you and tried to convince you that using the PBIP, even if you are a single developer, is worth it. And it's worth it because of the backup, because of the branching. You can get a lot of advantages there. But you can really take it to the next level when you have multiple developers. Okay, and when you have multiple developers, you should have a Git remote that could be Azure DevOps, that could be Bitbucket, it could be whatever the Git host, and this will let you basically have two developers, and the two developers working on the same project. They both synchronize to the remote Git, where it will hold the single source of the truth of your metadata of your project. And whenever they make changes, they can synchronize with that remote Git, and whenever there is a conflict, they can solve that conflict. Okay, and a conflict means two developers working on the same page or two developers working on the same measure. Because if they are not working on the same page, if you have one developer working on the dataset, one developer working on the report, that's fine. You are good. So there won't be any conflict. You just need to synchronize changes. Now, another thing, and I'm not going into details on this, but whenever you start to have the co-development and using Git, it's important to define a good branching strategy. There are plenty of them. These are, let's say, the main four. I don't like to say one is better than the other. Of course, that I have my preference, but it will depend on your team. It will depend on your organization. So the thing is, you need to research a little bit about this, and then choose the best for your organization and your team. And most importantly, you need to consider the type of developers that is going to work on the projects. Now we are going to talk a little bit about more focus on DevOps. So until here, you could use DevOps, GitHub, whatever. Now, if you want to integrate and have an easy integration with Fabric, then this is only supported by Azure DevOps. We are bringing really soon, hopefully early next year, GitHub as well, but for now it's only Azure DevOps. And what we allow you to do in Fabric and integration is, so you use developer mode, you save as a PBIP, you initialize your Git repo, and then whenever you publish to Azure DevOps, the Fabric Git integration and in a workspace, you have a setting that will let you connect your workspace to an Azure DevOps. And whenever you do that connection, Fabric will take care of reading the metadata on your Azure DevOps and bringing that those items and creating and updating those items in the workspace. But you can also do it the other way around. So you can also create things in the workspace or make changes in the workspace, like making a report change in the workspace, synchronize that to the Azure DevOps repo, and then open it back in desktop. And if you think, this is really, really useful, because now, in my opinion, it's no longer a bad practice to make changes in the service. Why? Because whatever you do in the service, it will also synchronize to the Azure DevOps. So you can start something in the service. You can do it just for convenience, like you need to do you need to fix a measure. You can use web modeling to fix that measure, and you will instantly see that. So you don't need to go through any deployment. And you know that in the end, it will be synchronized to the Azure DevOps, and tomorrow you can continue that development using desktop. Okay, so let me make a demo of this. So you start by opening Azure DevOps, creating a new repo, and I'm going to do that. So I'm creating a new repo, and then when you create a new repo, if it is an empty repo, it will give you an URL that you can copy. And because I already have my PBIP, I already initialized my VS Code, I can open VS Code and I can connect that Git repo to my local Git repo to my remote Git repo by just configuring the remote. And you go to the Azure DevOps branch configuration, and you have this remote option, and you just click Add Remote, and in there you will paste the Azure DevOps remote repo URL, and you publish the branch, and that's it. So from now on, you just need to do this once, and from now on, every change that you do, you can synchronize it. Every change that you do in VS Code or every change that you do in desktop and you save, you can synchronize that change to Azure DevOps. Now, though, what you need to do next is you need to go to the workspace, and inside the workspace, you have this workspace settings, and you have this Git integration option, and you can click here. And in this Git integration, you need to configure your Azure DevOps organization, the project, and the Git repo. So this is like a hierarchy. So in Azure DevOps, you can have multiple organizations. Inside of one organization, you can have multiple projects. Inside the project, you can have multiple repos. I'm going to select the repo I created just now, and you select the branch, because inside of a repo, you can also have multiple branches. And whenever you do that synchronization, now all my items are going to be synchronized automatically into the workspace. I don't know if you noticed, but on the first synchronization, if you open the report won't have any data. That's why, because one more time, the GitHub in the source control doesn't have that cache ABF file. Even if it does have the cache ABF file, no, the Git integration is not going to read it. It's only going to read the metadata. So the first time the data set will be in this state, so no data. So you need to refresh the data set, and you need to configure the gateways, the credentials, whatever it needs to be configured. You only need to do this once per workspace and data set. And after that, the data set the report will start working. Now, as I told you, what you can do is you can also create things in that workspace, because the connection, it's not per data set or per report, it's per workspace. So that workspace now is connected with your Azure DevOps. So if I create a new report, now in the top, I have this banner that will have an indication that, okay, I have a change, and the changes I can click and I can review that change. And in here, you are also using Git and some of the Git concepts like pull and commit, but this is much more user-friendly because you don't need to configure any tool. You don't need to learn. Yeah, you still need to learn a few of the Git concepts, like what is a commit and what is an update, but nothing more than that. So this means that you can have report creators starting to use this feature without having to learn about Git or having to learn too much about Git. So I do the commits, and now the change that I did in my workspace is going to be, it's now synchronized with my Azure DevOps. Let me just show you one thing that is interesting. So in the bottom right, left, you have this, in the toolbar, you have an indication to which branch your workspace is connected, what was the last time it synced, and what was the last commit. So we can even click on this last commit link, and this will take you to Azure DevOps, and it will have like a history of that last commit. What was the changes that you did in the workspace? In this case, is I just created a new report, so I'll have a new report folder. And now, if I go back to my VS Code and I do a Git pull, so I'm going to synchronize the version in the workspace in DevOps to my local version. So if you notice, that is that folder doesn't exist yet. I just have the sales and the reports. And now if I do a sync or a Git pull, I have that new folder in here. And now, and this was a report that was created in the service. It was created using the auto-generate tool, and now I can open back this report in desktop and continue editing that report. This is also, if you like, for example, if you like that auto-generated report and you want to make some changes using desktop, this is a good way for you to do it. Now, let me show you another demo that it's, let's say, not the most conventional one, because what I showed you, let's say it's the typical scenario. You save as a PBIP, you initialize your local Git repo, you created the repo, you synchronize to the repo, and now you want to connect that repo to your workspace. But you can also do it the other way around. So you can also go to any of your existing workspace that already has a ton of content in here. So I have this workspace with a lot of reports and data sets in it. And you can just create a new repo in Azure DevOps. So you do the same thing we just did before. And okay, you create that empty repo. And then you go to the workspace settings, you go to the Git integration, and you connect to that Azure DevOps repo. And you can also do another thing that is very interesting, is this Git folder. And the Git folder, so the normal scenario, or the most typical scenario, is you have one folder, one workspace, one repo. Okay, and that repo might have multiple branches, multiple variations, but you have one workspace, one repo. But another thing that you can do is you can have one repo, a single repo with multiple workspaces, with multiple metadata from different workspaces in it. And to do that is you need to use the Git folder configuration. So what I'm doing is I have this workspace. I'm going to connect two workspaces to the same repo, and I'm going to configure two Git folders, two different Git folders. So in here, I'm going to use the demo export 1, and I'm going now to another workspace, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. But now I'm connecting exactly to the same repo, exactly the same branch, but now I'm going to use another configuration in my Git folder. And what the Git integration will do, if I now go to my empty repo and I refresh, I will have two folders, one folder for each workspace with the entire data set and report items of that workspace exported as a PBIP. Okay. Now, I'm not telling you that using the Git folder is better than not using the Git folder. It will depend. So if you are in a scenario that, let's say, you have a project and that project has multiple workspaces. So if you have one workspace for the data sets, one workspace for the reports, or multiple workspace, or like you may have like a sales project that has the commercial workspace with commercial reports and the stocks workspace with stocks reports. Maybe it will be, instead of having multiple repos, you can have a single repo for that entire project and then configure different folders. Okay, that's one advantage, but it will depend. It will depend on your scenario. Another thing of this demo that I also say that it's not conventional is this is a very nice way for you to convert in bulk multiple PBIX files to a PBIP, because in Power BI Desktop, we don't give you any API to convert a PBIX to a PBIP. But you can do this in the service. You can create a workspace, upload 100 PBIX into that workspace, enable the integration, and you will get the PBIP representation of those 100 workspaces. And another advantage of this technique is if you ever use the XMLA edits on a data set, you will notice that you can no longer download that data set back into desktop. Guess what? Using this, you can, because you can have an XMLA edited data set, you connect it to Git, you export it to the Azure DevOps, and now you can open it back in Power BI Desktop, no problem at all, and it's perfectly supported. So this is a nice workaround to that scenario where you just want to go back into desktop on an XMLA edited data set. Just have in mind that if you do a feature that it's not supported by Power BI Desktop, like creating multiple partitions, you won't be able to open it in desktop because desktop does not support the multiple partitions. And this takes me to that initial conversation of the hardening, okay? Okay, and I know that I'm speeding a little bit, but I'm trying to show how much content that I can. I also want to talk a little bit about continuous integration. And then I will stop for questions. So in my opinion, one of the biggest advantages as well of the PBIP and having a metadata definition of your development is that now you can inspect that metadata. And as inspect that metadata, I also mean that you can implement tests and validations and quality gates to your metadata before it reaches the production, or before it reaches the final workspace. And I cannot tell this and advise customers to use this enough. I witnessed this firsthand because before joining the product team, I was a consultant for more than 15 years. And I always was an early adopter into the tabular editor best practice analyzer, the BPA rules, and within my team, having this implemented greatly improved the team efficiency and also greatly improved the team quality, because inside of a team of developers, you will have multiple levels. If it is a big team, you have a team in a project of 5 people, I'm sure that those 5 people won't all be in the same level. You will have a junior and senior people inside that team. And what will happen whenever you bring someone new, like that is a junior, you need to bring him up to the quality level that you want inside of your team. And how do you do that? So you give him training, or the best way is you put him side by side with a more senior person that will review his work and it will teach them. So with implementing those quality rules and those continuous integration processes, and especially in Power BI, you can implement a set of rules that you can customize to your company. You can adapt it to your team, to the things that you care the most. And I can tell you that, number one, basic mistakes will never be committed again. And if they do, they will get an error whenever they try to deploy or whenever they try to commit that into the main branch. And they will get warned by that. And most of the people, even though that junior developer, it will be able to automatically and without having to spend time of the most senior person to review that work, because you will see a meaningful message saying, hey, you are using a non-theme color on a report, or you are using you are using a table reference in a measure, or you are using the auto date time, or you are using columns, and this is very common, by the way. Your data set has 5 columns that are not used anywhere. The columns are hidden. They are not using in summarize by, they are in sort by, they are not using in measure. So they are just hidden, and no one is going to view those columns. Do you really want to, are you sure you want to have them in the model? Are you sure you want to consume memory because of that? So having this, I'm just trying to justify that this can really, really improve your efficiency in a team. So how can you do that with a PBIP? So what you can do is you can set up a process like this in Azure DevOps, where you will have a pipeline, and that pipeline will make sure that it will run a bunch of rules over the dataset metadata and the report metadata, so that model BIM and the report.json file. And let's say in the scenario that you have a developer that is working in Power BI desktop, so that developer is working on the PBIP, is using the VS Code, and it creates a feature branch called feature dataset change. And whenever is done with his work, it will create a pull request. And this is another Git concept that is important for you to understand and learn more about it. But the pull request is basically taking the code of his isolated branch and bring it to the main branch. And whenever he does the pull request, this is the place that it will kick in a build pipeline. And that build pipeline, if it breaks, I cannot commit into main. So I will get blocked from doing my commit into main. If it doesn't break, then the team lead or even myself, I can do the merge into main. And the same thing may happen on another user that is not using Power BI desktop. It's making a report change in the service. So he made that change. He also created a feature branch in the service. And whenever he does the pull request, the same process will happen. And in here, instead of validating the data set, I'm going to apply validation rules to the report, because now and today, there are 2 tools. One is the tablet editor that can run the BPA rules from Michael Kowalski from the Power BI CAD team. And there is another tool called PBI Inspector, created by a Microsoft colleague called Nat Van Gogh, that does exactly the same thing, the same concept, but over the report. So it's a bunch of rules that will validate things like, if you have a report and that report has a theme file, and anyone is using a non-theme color in a visual, so a static color, I want to break my build. And I know that I'm running out of time. There is an end-to-end tutorial that I launched, or we launched last week, and that has a step-by-step to the entire process, how you can set up this end-to-end. Let me just do a quick demo, and I will probably skip a few things. So you create that new repo, you connect, so you go to an existing workspace, you connect this existing workspace to an Azure DevOps repo, and then in Azure DevOps, you go to this option over here called pipelines, and you need to create a new pipeline, and inside that pipeline, you can start with an example. So in the tutorial, there is a link to an existing pipeline that you can just copy and paste, so you don't need to change anything at all. So I'm just doing that. I'm going to copy and paste this in the YAML pipeline we just created, and this is it. So you just have a YAML pipeline, and you can run this YAML pipeline. And whenever you run the YAML pipeline, you will get a report like this. This will trigger 2 jobs, one for the datasets, one for the report. And whenever there is an error, you will get an error. In this case, there are a bunch of warnings. And warnings are things that, as a team or in my project, I don't want to break things. I don't want to stop a developer for making that change if there is a warning. I just want to stop if there is an error. So these are things that I want to warn my developers. Maybe it's a good idea for you to look at that. Maybe it's not the It's not the best practice, but I don't want to break anything. So my data set right now, it's always good. So I don't have any errors. Whenever you run it, you can even go deep dive and you can view all the data sets, because in my workspace, I have multiple data sets and multiple reports. So the rules and the YAML pipeline is already, it was built to look into all the data sets and all the reports inside that repo. And it will summarize. So when you go into details, it will summarize. You can expand and collapse for each report and for each data set. Okay, now the next thing that you need to do is you need to go to the branch, to the main branch. So in my case, I only have one branch for now, and you need to enable something called branch policies. And when you do that, when you enable the branch policies, this means that you can no longer make a commit directly into main. So you always need to work on a branch. So every time you want to create a new data, make a measure change, you need to create a branch. You do that measure change, you test your things, and then you need to create a pull request. So otherwise you cannot do it. And another thing that you can do in the branch policies is you can say that whenever there's a pull request, I want to run this build pipeline. And so you do, and you only need to do this once. After you do this, now if I try to do a commit directly into main, I will get an error. So I'm going to try to do that just to demonstrate. I'm going to try to edit the file in my main branch, and now I get this meaningful error saying pushes to this branch are not permitted. You need to create a pull request. So let's do that. So let's go to Power BI Desktop. Let's make a measure change. Going to create a new measure, and let's do a batch change. So I'm going to use something that it's definitely not advisable, is to reference a measure using the qualified name, using the table. And when I do that, I save my changes, and I go back to VS Code, to DevOps, and now, because I was working on an isolated branch that I also created in VS Code, now I can create my pull request. And when I create the pull request, this is where the magic will kick in. Because I'm a developer, I can do whatever I want. So I can do that bad practice. I can even run the rules locally if I wanted. But now, okay, I think I'm done. I did all my changes, and I want to move this into, let's say, I want to move this into production. So I do a pull request into main, and this is where this will kick in the build validation. And now the senior person will get a notification saying that someone is trying to commit, to do a commit into main. Wait a minute. I can see that the build pipeline kicked in. It's telling me that there are this measure over here is violating a rule. I can even see the files and look into the files and review those changes. I can also make some comments. I can call out the developer saying, hey, please make sure that you follow all the best practice best practice rules of our team. And then the developer go back into Power BI Desktop. He can fix that change. And now, if he does if he does another commit, he doesn't need to create a pull request because the pull request was already open. So there was a new commit, and the developer can so the build validation will run again. And in this case, it will just tell you that, okay, the build succeeded and you can complete the pull request. And by complete the pull request, it will now it's on main, and now I can go to my workspace and I can synchronize the changes from main into the workspace. And I know that I'm already 1 minute out of time. The same thing, you can do exactly the same thing now for the report. Let me just show you that. So I just made a change in the report. I created a report.
Rui, just by the way, there is no issue if you have 5-10 more minutes. No issue at all. Just take your time.
No problem, no problem. Yeah, but I do have an hard stop. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I just want to show, and but this is all in the tutorial, but in here I'm doing the exact same thing, but now for the report. So I can see that, for example, it's telling me that this page is using visuals that are not using theme colors, and in this case, I'm doing all my changes in the service. I can even get more information like the visual ID that has that change, and in that case, it's using another tool called the PBI inspector. One more time, everything is in this tutorial, so we made some effort to document the whole thing and put it in our official documentation. I'm a strong believer that this is something that you definitely should invest.
Great, Rui, thank you very much. It was very interesting. I also learned some stuff. I didn't know about the extension in Visual Studio Code for the Git history, so installed it right away. Any questions from the audience? I see Kelly, yes.
Yes, I'm absolutely thrilled. It looks fantastic. Yeah, I have two very quick questions. I think one would be more a generic thing is what do you suggest for the data sets when it comes to Git control? Do you exclude, would you put the cache file into the Git ignore, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, you definitely should put the cache file in the Git ignore. By default, it will be there. So if you save as a PBIP, you will see that there will be a Git ignore with a cache ABF as a Git ignore file.
Okay, the only downside, of course, people will have to get the data again. And then the other question is, you mentioned rather early on that the source control will...
Can I just mention something that... I'm saying that if you, let's say if you have a really slow data source and you want to avoid by any means to force all the 3-4 developers working on the same project to have to refresh the data again. In that scenario, you can go to the Git ignore and remove the Git ignore file. I don't recommend doing that, especially if the cache ABF file is large, because Git is not good to handle 1 GB files, and because every time there is a change, it will do that diff and it will save another gigabyte. It will blow up your storage. But there is something that you can do. You can just copy and paste the cache ABF file to the other developer, so you can have the cache ABF saved share it through OneDrive. The other developer downloads it, put it in the folder, and when they open Power BI Desktop, it will just load it.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah. And then the other question, you mentioned earlier on that that there will be improvement to the source control, and then at the end you show this TMDL, which I had never heard of before. Is it that what you meant? There will be improvement, or is there something else on the horizon?
Yeah, yes, that's what I meant. So because instead of being a single JSON, it will be a YAML folder structure, and the same thing will happen on the report. So on the report, instead of a single JSON, it won't be a YAML format. It will still be JSON, but it will be a folder where each visual will have their own JSON and individual JSON file.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, I see Alexandra.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. Super exciting. So we have already built our own custom solution because there was none around. So it's all based on GitLab, what we built with pipelines that automatically deploy whenever you push something to main, and pushes something to, if you have feature branches, it goes to dev and then to pre-prod, and then switches connections, and set service principles as to pull the data and so on and so forth. Everything is based on GitLab currently. And it's a bit a pity currently that I think we can't really make a lot of use of the PBI project currently, because as I understood, if we use GitLab, the only option to publish currently is to actually open a file and manually publish, right?
Okay. there are a couple of things there. First, in GitLab, you store the PBIX in Git, or you store the bin file and the PBIX just for the reports?
The problem is we need the PBIX file because otherwise the pipeline can't deploy it, right? So that's the problem we currently have, which is not nice.
Okay, so first, if you want to store the PBIX inside of Git, of GitLab, you can still use the PBIP, and then in the end maybe have a folder with the PBIP where you get all the advantages of working on the metadata, and then you save as a PBIX when you want to deploy, and then you put the PBIX inside the GitLab and you follow the same procedure. Not sure, because there are other ways. If you wanna use the pipelines, you need to deploy using the PBIX, but you could also deploy using the XMLA and still use the pipelines as well. But there are much more details about that. Now, another alternative, and I didn't got the time to talk about that will ship next month, is there will be a new set of APIs in Fabric that will let you, let's say from GitLab, you can have the PBIP and then deploy to the workspace using those APIs, directly using the metadata from the report or the metadata from the data set. So that will be possible. I'm also working, and we on the Power BI team, we're also working on a new PowerShell module that will make it really easy, that you can just target to a PBIP folder and say deploy this PBIP into a workspace, or deploy this PBIP and change the logo before publishing, or change the visual, or change the data set that the report is connected to. So you need to wait a little bit, a few more weeks. But when that API lands, you will have other options. Let's say if you are not using Azure DevOps to deploy your content. Okay.
That's the best answer I could have wished for. I'm really looking forward to the APIs. Yeah, that solves lots of my problems, I think.
Believe me, they are amazing, the APIs. I'm really excited about them.
Cool. Yeah, thank you very much.
I do need to drop. I'm sorry. Maybe we can. I can come back to another session, and maybe we can deep dive a little bit on a few more advanced scenarios. Thank you for having me one more time. It was really good to present to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Rui, and I will invite you for sure again.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Right, then let me take over again. Share. So there we are. Let's continue with the user group. Let's now go into the what's new section. I have 3 little updates, more or less little, and then I will hand over to Denis, who will talk about the Data Activator. And what's new? One thing which I'm a little bit excited about is the new model view enhancement within Power BI Desktop. It's a preview feature, so again, you would need to enable it under the option settings. But once enabled, and if you go to the model view, you will really see the semantic model now of Power BI. So it's not just a data set. You see in the screenshot, you can see, for example, calculation groups, cultures, measures, perspectives, stuff like this. And now within this view, you can also edit the semantic model. You cannot edit everything. So for example, you can edit relationship, roles, tables. You can add calculation groups, for example. But what cannot be created right now, for example, are perspectives and cultures. If you're familiar with it, very useful from my point of view, but unfortunately for those things, still third-party tool is needed. But at least calculation groups can now be created. I'm gonna show you how that looks like. I have a slide for that. Forgot about it. I have a slide for that as well. So to create calculation group, it's pretty simple. You go on it, right click on it, say new calculation group. what will pop up is a window saying that implicit measure will be discouraged. So this means every measure that you need has to be explicit. What does it mean? Implicit measure at the end means if you load a table into Power BI and you have, for example, a field called revenue, sales, whatever, this is implicit because it's already there. And an explicit measure means you are explicitly creating a DAX measure to calculate, for example, the summarization or the average or whatever. And therefore, because you're explicitly creating it, it's called explicit measure. And for calculation groups, you will require explicit measure, and all implicit measures, as the message says, will be discouraged. And once done, you can create your items that you need, like in the screenshot you see, for example, previous year, year over year, and year over year in percentage. And let me show that. So I'm switching here to my Power BI desktop. I have the feature enabled, meaning if I go to the model view, I have on the right-hand side model. You can see it over here. I have model, and this is now the semantic model that I can see. And if I go to my calculation group and say new calculation group, this is the message that will pop up. As explained, the implicit measure will be discouraged. I'm saying, yes, this is okay. And once done, what it does is it automatically creates a calculation item. And this calculation item, if I select it, is nothing else than pointing to the selected measure. Once done, it will be more clear to what exactly it is pointing to. But at the end, it means that this measure that I put into my calculation group, based on it, it should be calculated. This is the selected one. And now, if I wish to create, for example, a previous year calculation, all I have to do is I go to the calculation items. I say new calculation item. Then I have now here my DAX statement that let me make it a little bit bigger, in which I can say I wish to have previous year. I go for calculate. I calculate based on my selected measure. And I wish to have same period last year, for example, and go for the date table. This is the date that I have specified, and closing. And now I am automatically calculating the previous year for the measure that I put in. How that works is, if I go to the report view, let me create a new tab. If I go now to calculation group, I can edit, and I can add a KPI. Let me edit, for example, revenue. There we are. And let me add a date, year. Let me make it a little bit nicer. There we are. And what it does now, I can really see that 2013 is now the previous year. And 2014, so this bar chart is now this bar chart. And I really have a comparison in this simple chart, comparing on 1 year, the current year, and my previous year. For the selection, in this case, revenue inclusive tax. And if I go now further, I can go back to my model view, and I can also create something for year over year. So I go again, say new calculation item. I'm going to call it year over year. And I say selected measure. And I wish to calculate my selected measure again. And I wish to have from my calculation group the calculated piece from, there we are, from my previous year. So I'm pointing now exactly to my previous year calculation. And if I do so, it takes a second, there we are. And if I go back to my bar chart, what it does now, it's calculating year over year difference at the end. So let me quickly show that. In the year 2014, actual, we have 57 million. Previous year, we had 52.5 million. And the difference now is 4.8 million in this case. So something between 4.5 and 5 million, rough math. So this is at the end what the difference is. And therefore showing it already in my graph. Same goes for the next year. And obviously the next year, 2016, looks like it's pretty bad because we have 26 millions more or less. According to the 62 from previous year, this is a minus of 36 millions more or less. And lastly, if I go back to my model view, I can also create a percentage calculation. Let me do that one more time. New calculation item, I say year-over-year percentage equals, let me do it a little bit nicer. I want to divide my calculate, and I'll go for my selected measure. And then I point to calculation group. My calculation group is year-over-year. And I'll close here the brackets. And I wish to calculate again. In this case, selected measure again, coming from my calculation group. And this time it's the previous year to get the percentage at the end. I hope I don't have a typo. Let me edit. There we are. And now what I can do is I can go in and add, it's already there. It's barely seeable. This is the percentage over here. So let me make a table view of it. It's a little bit better to read. Metrics probably better than table. There we are. And we already see everything that we saw previously in the bar chart, as well as the year-over-year. But there is now one little thing. This one is also a number, formatted as number, like the other ones. And this doesn't make really sense. It would be better if this would be percentage as well, right? And what we can do is, if we go back to the model view, I can really specify on each item that I created on the right-hand side a dynamic format string. And if I enable that, I can edit this format string. At the top, sorry. I can edit it. I hope I will get it as I should. Should be something like this, percentage. And now only this specific piece will be visible in a percentage format, and everything else is, as you see, formatted in a number format. And for those who are not so familiar with calculation groups, what's the biggest benefit of it? Imagine I have to create now the same calculation for every measure that I wish. So for example, revenue inclusive tax, revenue exclusive tax, profit, gross profit, or whatever. I do not have to recreate so many measures at once. I just create it once, and I can put in every measure that I wish into it. Right now it doesn't make sense, but just to or let me probably create a new measure quickly. If I go to new measure, and I'm going to call it, what do I have here? Give me a sec. So that sales, let's go with profit. If I go again, say new measure, and I'm going to call it profit and just summarizing it. And let me create another measure for quantity, new measure. Quantity, I say some quantity, not quarter, that's the wrong one. Here we are. I can now really easily just select quantity, just select my calculation group, and I can also say I wish to have it on a yearly base. I can create a metrics out of it. And there we are. I have the same calculation now, again, for my quantity. And I can see already what's the year-over-year percentage growth or in total numbers. And same goes obviously for profit. So it's really an easy way to create calculations in a central place. And obviously, if I change something in this central place, it will be valid for every other piece as well. Questions to that?
Yeah, Philip speaking here.
Please.
Then it's a substitute for tabular editor in part of it, right?
Yes. I mean, until now, the only way was to go with Tabular Editor, SQL Server Management Studio, or Visual Studio, or I don't know, any third-party tool. But now it's not needed anymore, as you really can create calculation groups within Desktop at the end.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
Sure. But as a note, it's not 100% a substitute because there's still stuff that cannot be created through the UI in Desktop. As mentioned, for example, the perspectives, those still needs to go through a third-party tool.
Yeah, that was clear. It was partly of, yeah.
Good. Any further questions? Doesn't look like. Then let me switch back to PowerPoint. There is one awesome feature as well, which we introduced for those who are working with deployment pipelines in Power BI Premium. Since a few days, you can finally specify the number of stages that you wish to have, and you can also name them as you wish. So the minimum are 2 stages, maximum 10 stages. And let me show how that looks like. If I switch to service, if I go to deployment pipelines, hitting here, create a pipeline, testing or whatever I'm going to call it, say next. Now you see finally, per default, we have the 3 stages, but now I can really add one or even delete one. Meaning if I go in and say add, and now instead of production, my 3rd one should be UAT, my 4th one should be production. I can say create, and now it's really created. And at the top over here, you can move left and right to see all stages in this case. 2 little remarks. One is if you wish to rename your stage, you can do so. There is a little icon over here. If I click it, instead of development, I can call it dev, for example, and save. But if I wish to modify the stages, meaning I wish to now reduce it to 3 stages, or I wish to extend it to more stages, in such a case, you will need to create a new pipeline. That's not possible, not supported. Not sure if this will come, but right now this is the limitation. So the stage numbers are fixed, but the names of the stages are at the end flexible. I saw a message pop up, a question, I guess. Let me check it quickly. Will the pipelines also support Fabric Lakehouse or Warehouse? Not sure, honestly, haven't seen it yet. Our goal is at the end to support Git integration as well for Lakehouse, Warehouse, and the other artifacts. Therefore, the worst case scenario would be that you can go through Azure DevOps pipelines. Not sure it will be supported here. I haven't seen anything, but I could argue both ways, so really don't know if it will be or if it will not be. Any further questions? All right, then one last thing to mention, a new update is as well, if you open up Power BI Desktop with the latest version, it will look a little bit differently. Let me do that in the meantime. And now we have a Power BI home screen as well in Desktop, meaning if you logged in, you will be connected to Power BI Service, and you will have as well some recent open reports coming from Service, but as well from your file section. And you see it's still loading, but once loaded, you will see There we are. And recent opened reports. In my case, I opened a lot from my file section, from my local file. So that's the reason why I see those. You see as well a little bit the modified ones. And if I wish, I can start a new report just by hitting here this first sign at the top. So we modified a little bit this experience as well. Questions to that? Doesn't look like. In such a case, we move over to the third piece of today for the data activator. And with that, I hand over to Denis.
Thank you very much. I will do a quick introduction to the data activator. First question, do you see my screen?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay. Is there, Kellen, do you have another question? No, okay, good. Then the data activator was the one part missing in Fabric for a long time. And last week, I think it was, the preview was announced and is generally available now. But the first question is, what the hell is the data activator? So in general, it's a no-code data alert and actions platform, what I will show in a minute. As I mentioned, you can do data alerts and actions, and you don't have to know how to code at all. Question is also, how does it work? First, you have to connect to your data with the data activator. And the data can be multiple sources. So it can be a measure in a Power BI report. It can be streaming data. It can come from different sources, but we will also go into detail to this. Then you have to define the conditions. So when should an alert be triggered? And afterwards, you have to define what will happen after the condition is met and after the alert was triggered. A small example that is from a Microsoft slide. So you have a few data sources. For example, it could be Power BI, Synapse Data Warehouse, Synapse Real-Time Analytics. Then the data activator is connecting to this data source. You have the no-code experience where you have different models. Then, as I mentioned, you have to define the rules. And at the end, you have to trigger something. And what you can trigger is different options. By default, you can, of course, write in Teams a message or trigger a Teams message. You can write an email. And you can, of course, also include Power Automate or do a custom action. Same slide, a little bit more technical. So the data sources that you have, they are usually, or many of them are within Fabric. So it can be a KQL element that we had already, you might remember a few weeks ago, we had introduction to KQL in the user group. It can be event hubs. So if you have a device that is sending data to an event hub, the data activator can take this data and show something or trigger it. It can be values from a Power BI report. And as I mentioned already, also the SQL data warehouse. Then in the meantime, you can do the no-code user experience, do interactive analysis or real-time stream processing. And at the end, this is the same as before. We have different options. What do we need to test or to try the data activator? One or the other, you might wonder also, is this not like subscribe to a report or to a tile in a dashboard? It is kind of, but you have many, many more options in the data activator, but you will see during the demo. So the question is, what do you need to test the data activator? And actually the prerequisites at the moment are pretty low. The only thing you have to do is you have to enable, or your tenant admin has to enable it in your Fabric tenant. And afterwards it's enabled, you can test it since a week, I guess. Then you need a certain data source. As we mentioned, these are the ones listed. You need the models, rules, and triggers. And at the end, you can create some actions. And now I want to show you how all of this looks like. For this, I created an own workspace in Power BI. The you have different areas. So you could, of course, go to the Data Activator directly and start a reflex, but we will go to the real-time analytics first. In our case, I created already upfront an event stream. And actually this event stream is taking data from a website live, and it's putting it directly into Power BI. So this is now nothing specific about the Data Activator. This is streaming data. For this, I have a Python program running, and this Python program is going to the website, and it's taking the water level from Seattle. And at the moment, it's every 30 seconds, it's repeating the whole thing. As you might think, the water level will not change within 30 seconds so much. So I just added a random factor to it that it's between 91 and 110% of the value. So at least we see a little bit change of the value itself. And this program is running at the moment. It's sending every 30 seconds data to the event stream. Let's go to the event stream itself. This is pretty straightforward. So if you have an event stream, you always have a source. In our case, this is the API I just used with my Python code. I have to send it to this endpoint that is hidden behind this asterisk here. It has also a few examples how you can stream the data. Then we see the data itself. So we see here every couple of seconds we have a timestamp. We have water levels. As I mentioned, they are multiplied so that they change a little bit. We have the latitude and longitude, so we also have the position of the measurement where the water is taken. We have the water station itself and UTC time and partitions. And what we can do now in the event stream, we can add a different output, and one of these outputs, so we could also create a new one. We could, for example, write directly into a lakehouse. You'll probably know it now after our Fabric introduction. You could write to a KQL database. For now, the most interesting is the reflex. And the reflex is the Data Activator element that we want to use. I also prepared it already that it can gather some data. And actually, in my case, I just created a new one. And we will take a look at this in a second. So here I created this reflex with water level. If I open it, now we're in Data Activator. And first of all, we have down here a few tabs. So at the moment, it's Data and Design. Let's go to our Data tab. And we see here the data that is live streamed from our program, here from our Python program. That is just taking the data and pushing it to this endpoint. You can take a look at the live data, and it will also change while we have it open. And actually, you see here also the events per hour. So how many events we have in every hour. You can also change the time frame to the events in a given time frame. And you get an idea how the data looks that we're looking. This data can come from different sources. As I mentioned, this is now streaming data, but it could also be an event hub, what is also streaming data, KQL, or other data sources. After we have this data, we want also to trigger something. So in our case, for example, maybe I want to check when the water is above a certain level. I want to get an alert or something like this. So here I could go to the water level. I have to create an object and alert water level, I will call it. And afterwards, I can go to the design mode after creation. When I create now this object, we go here to the other tab. Before we were at the data tab, that is just showing us the data. Afterwards, we will head over to the design tab, and we have here the now created event. And now we have to create a trigger because we want to get a reaction if something specific happens. In our case, as we said, we want to get a message or something if the water is going above a certain level. So at the moment, we don't have any triggers, so we have to click here, New Trigger. And new trigger will start. And now I have to select a property or a record. In general, as we have this window open here, we have 3 areas. So the first one that is open right now is select. We have to select a certain item that we want to define. Then we have to detect a specific condition, for example, that the water is above a certain level. And afterwards, we define the action that should happen once this case happens. So in our case, we say we want to have a column from the stream, and we take our water level value. And now it's showing us all of the water level values that they were recorded in the given time frame. For us now, the last 50 minutes. We could also take the last hour. And you see the values themselves. You also can, if you have more, at the moment, I think the values are IDs. Should have changed that in the data set. But if you have other values, you would see them here. So you can just take a look at 1, 2, 3 levels. Let's say, for example, we would have IDs of locations, or now when we talk about water levels, we probably would talk about the station where the measurement is taken. And you would see what values are returned in the last time frame. And now we want to add a condition. So for example, if we don't have to look at the data points themselves, let's say we would have a false positive. So let's say we get the water levels, they're all around the same level, and suddenly we get one that is a meter higher. This doesn't make any sense. So probably we also want to summarize over a given time frame. So in our case, for example, we want to summarize the average over time. So I could now say, give me the average of the last 10 minutes or the last 5 minutes. And in this case, it would not just send you if one value is above a certain levels, but it would summarize over 5 minutes. You can also do other conditions, not just the average over time. You can also say maximum over time. Let's say this would be important if, for example, you measure if you have packages or food delivery, and it's not allowed to go above a certain degree. The temperature, you could say if it's above a certain time over a certain degree. So if it's one value, probably it's a wrong value. But if the temperature is over 1, 2, 3 minutes over a certain degree, I want to get an alert. So you could also change that here. So if the maximum is over 10 minutes, but we will take for the moment now the average of, let's say, 10 seconds. If the average over 10 seconds is now our condition, and then we choose what we want to detect. So if, for example, we want to say if it's greater than, let's see what is here, the average value is around 5 point, or we have here many values around 5.6. We want to trigger something. So let's say if the value is above 5, and now you can say each time, or you can define, for example, if it's above this value for a number of times. That's also what I meant, for example, with the temperature. You could say only if I get 3, 4, 5 data items in a row, then I want to trigger an alert. So if I want to say if it stays above this value for, I don't know, 5 minutes, I want to get an alert. Or you can say if it stays above this trigger for a different amount. So if it's just going once above and then again down, there's no trigger starting. But if it's staying above this amount for a longer time, you could define that. And if this criteria is matched, then you can select an action. In our case, you could either send an email or, for example, let's do something easier, a Teams message. And I can say the trigger condition for the following object has been met. And then check your data. And then I can define that Teams is sending this message is sent by Teams to myself. I could start the whole procedure. I could also try a test alert, but I did this before. First, I have to save. And now it doesn't work, I think, because I did it before. And if you start now the condition, all of the values will be evaluated all the time. What means my data activator is triggering or monitoring all of my data. And if the condition is met over a certain time, I will get an alert. And I open this already. Then I get a Teams message like this. And I can then, I don't know, do something. Probably not with the water, but more likely with the temperature, in case it's above a certain amount. You can also have different events. I mean, we showed now the send as teams. You can also create custom actions. So, for example, you could create a Power Automate flow. And based on this Power Automate flow, you can start different workloads or triggers, send emails. You can do whatever is possible with Power Automate. But I will not go deep into this. That's one example how you could do it. Another one, let's say we start again with a reflex. You can also, I mean, you can start directly with a reflex and choose then the data, especially if you want to try, they have quite a few sample data. So you can try to play a little with this tool, and Microsoft is providing already some sample data that you can just analyze. Or what you also can do, as I mentioned, you can get your own data, and then you can do it from Power BI. I want to show it the other way around because I think that's most likely what you do in real life. So I created a report about the parking spots in Basel. That's actually real-time data. I mean, real-time when I refreshed it from the parkings in Basel City. So you see here all of the different parkings and how many are free. So this big one at the train station has now 406 free parking spaces, but probably I want to trigger one close to me. Let's say I would be somewhere close here and I want to get an alert when certain amount of parking spaces are available. What I can do now is in the different visuals, for example, in this one or in that one, I can have now when I click on the three, and this is important, when I click on the three dots of the visual, I can trigger now an action. That's the third option here. And when I do this, I first will be disappointed because Data Activator just started. So it's not supported for this type of visual. At the moment, I think it's only supported for bar charts. Let's quickly remove the filter. So we will change this to a bar chart. That was the wrong one. I wanted to change that. And let's take the free spaces to the x-axis. And now I should be able to trigger an action. So that looks better. And now I have different areas where I can create an alert. So first of all, I can choose between the measurements that are now in this visual. In my case, it's only the free spaces. And then I want to say for each park house, I have to change when I want to trigger this event. So every day, every 5 minutes, every hour. In my case, I want to see it every 5 minutes, and then it should tell me what to detect. I can, for example, say is greater than 10. That was not the wrong number. If we have more than 10 free parkings, then in our workspace real time, I should create a new reflex. And I continue now. In the background, it's now creating a new Data Activator reflex, and now I can start working with it. It takes usually a second or two. Then I can go to my Data Activator reflex. And once I'm in there, I can create my conditions. I could send an email, or I can again send a Teams message to myself. And then I can say more than 10 parkings available. I could also here, I could change for different parkings. So I could display different parkings, and I can also filter for them. And once I created this, I can start my trigger. I can send a test email to myself. And then I will always get a notification when something of this criteria is met. All right. Are there any questions so far? If not,
I don't see anything in the chat.
Then this would be my quick introduction to the Data Activator. In general, I played a little bit with it. It has quite nice possibilities. So until now, you could not define the criteria so much. And this is a big strength of the Data Activator. So really give it a try. I think it has a huge potential for the future. Also because you don't have to start it from Power BI. You can also start from the data within Fabric itself. But really give it a try.
What I like most is that you visually can also see at which certain points in time it would be triggered. That's really great.
All right. Do you want to finish, Kristian?
Yeah, sure. Gonna close it. Let me reshare my screen. Thanks very much. So just the usual for the resources for Fabric, I leave that every time in here. And just a reminder for the next call. The next user group will be obviously first Thursday of the month again from 4 to 6 on the 7th December. Denis and myself, we haven't defined yet what we're going to present, but what we decided is that we're going to do some kind of recap, perhaps best practices a little bit, highlights of features that we saw during the year. Such kind of a session will it be. We will specifically not include or invite a guest speaker. This is really like a recap of the year. And therefore, we haven't defined it yet, but therefore, looking forward to it to have a more user group specific call next time, let's say. And with that, thank you very much for attending. I hope it was useful and interesting. And if you have any further questions, we'll stay for the next 1, 2, 3 more minutes. Drop them in the chat, unmute yourself if you have any. Otherwise, I wish you a very pleasant evening. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Right, I don't see any questions. Then let me stop sharing and stop the recording as well.